Good evening. Welcome to the program. My name is Marty St James. I'm from the UK, which is a special place. I'm an artist and I'm here on Governor's Island.
Hey, Marty.
Hi.
I'm Chicava. I'm from Kumbay Dance. We're your neighbor down the lawn. We're having dance classes and wellness programs and music on the lawns on the island.
Hi, I'm Pena Bonita. I work out here at Governor's Island in the American Indian Community House. And we welcome everybody to come in and see the art that we hear. Mostly controversial, up-to-date understanding.
Hi everyone, my name is McLaughlin. My pronouns are he, him, and I work for New York City Audubon, which is a wildlife conservation organization protecting wild birds in the 5 boroughs. On the island, on Governor's Island, we have a seasonal environmental center, and that's where we have our Artist in Residence program, where we support artists working in art and wildlife conservation. And I curate and manage that program, as well as curate the various shows and pieces that take up the space here on the island.
That's cool. So how many, I don't have any fine arts since ours is all activity driven. How many artists do you all have working in your houses, like throughout the season? Does it come in waves, or is it like one set of artists?
Well, we have people who come for a month. Actors and writers that are working at the same place, coming and going. The place is used just for the American Indian community.
One thing I like to make perfectly clear is that we as Lenape believed in the concept of respect underlying all things.
So for kind of the configuration for our house, it's really important for me when planning it that we have a group of artists that stay throughout the whole 6-month residency. So they're able to kind of form a cohort together. They show work separately or together if it kind of, they find that relationship between their work, but it's up to them kind of when and how they present their work towards the end of the residency. So it's interesting. I think it's definitely a bit more complicated to have people stay for half a year, but it is a really cool experience to get people working in different ways, but kind of just from sharing the same space, they start to share ideas and strategies.
My history is performance art and video, but I also make photographic works as well. So I've landed here, and my great belief is that artists are about being in time and space. I would say that because of being a performance artist, but also through the medium of video as well. But now I make photographs. So I think that what I'm going to make here, I'm going to make something to do with my book, which is called Being in Time, Performance Art. It's out on Amazon.
Being in Time by Marty
St James.
St James.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I was interested in what Jesse said, if I may just say, about the conservation thing, because I've done 2 residencies in Antarctica with the Argentine government. They were very much about being in a wilderness, which is what Antarctica is. But it was the research aspects of it were to do with researching how artists can exist in such a wild space and have conservation notions on their mind as well. Not being able to leave things behind, not being able to leave any detritus because of the world certificate that's basically on Antarctica signed up. But I think that the main thing about that, more than the fact that I was there twice, was also the fact that it's something to think about for the future and for the present in terms of where we are on the planet. And I think artists of all types and nature have got a very real part to play in that, because it's not just down to politicians, because artists are much more interested than politicians.
Well, and also there's a different relationship between artists and makers and earth and land, and how artists, the mentality of approaching the land and the firmament from art is different. We don't commodify and commoditize like every piece of anything, They would, if they thought they could sell ice from Antarctica for $20 in 1-inch cube, they would, you know what I mean? But I think artists seek to work more in harmony with it, which is like really nice and fun with the drumming. It was just beautiful to hear drumming on this land and that interconnectedness again.
I think the idea of materiality is one conservation concern, right? So how do we as people interact with the material of our body, right? As like a performance aspect, how do we interact with the material of the land? And I think it's a much bigger concern, like how do we sustain art making? How do we sustain creation as an artist who works with material other than the body? Because I feel like often, from what I've seen as someone who works and thinks a lot about creating things for the purpose of communicating climate crisis, communicating wildlife conservation, communicating all of these things, is that there's a lot of focus on the product of it, which kind of makes us forget what we waste in the creation of that said product. So the material has to be considered, the land has to be considered throughout the entire process, and not just what are we communicating in the end. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the thing is, the point I try to make in my book is that, which is just one aspect of it, but the wonderful thing about performance art and other types of performance as well in relation to the arts is that it is sustainable because it is about the person, but it also has a sort of theoretical and philosophical aspect to it, which is to do with the idea of being an artist in time and space. Concerned me slightly over the years, because when I was a video artist, when I started being a video artist, everything was physical, analog, tapes. Now it's digital, which means it exists somewhere else in a different form. So it's getting less and less material, in a sense, which I think is also interesting. And then the third point I'd like to make is that I found out recently, through DNA tests, that I'm part Korean and I'm part indigenous North American Indian.
Get real.
Get real.
Get real.
How about that? Yeah.
You're the most British person I've ever met. How did can you trace for your Korean and a North American
I can trace it, but I've also had DNA tests that have told me the same
Yeah,
thing.
well, a friend of mine had a dog tested and it came back Cherokee.
Excellent, good. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're all mongrels, all of us are, and we have to stop seeing each other as, we have to find the things that are similar within us rather than the things that are different in us.
Our commonalities, yeah.
Our commonalities. Because we're all from the same source, basically, as such. And I think artists have a leading role to play in that.
I agree, and especially, as we start to straddle this more and more AI world and what is real and what's inside of you. I think artists are called upon to stay centered in their time and space between heaven and earth, in this body mind, and help by doing so either through their work convey the importance of that, or just through transmission, that something's gotta spring us back inward into a new way of feeling unified.
I don't know that I want to be unified.
Yes, I'm feeling the same way. Yeah.
That's terrible.
In a world that is politically taking care of us or abusing us. Okay?
I see the perspective, yeah.
And the art, certainly in my group, we address that. We address the fact that there are over 500 women who have been murdered, okay? In the house, we have put one complete wall of red dresses to represent the women who have been murdered or missing, okay? You cannot find these girls. They just didn't run away, okay? So we address these kind of issues in our art.
I went off in the woo-woo a little too idealistic for you. You're like, come on back down to earth with me, kiddo. I appreciate that. But as much as we raise attention to injustice, not even raise attention, use our work and our energy in these houses and everything that our organizations represent to push things in the direction that we want them to go, to stand at witness for that. That's what, and that can be like the anger and the rage of, is it 500 women that are missing in America in general, or often?
Alaska, Canada, the United States. See, one of the big problems is that tribal police cannot go off the reservations and have any power. Okay? The city, the state, the feds, they're not particularly interested in Indian women. So,
But like, yeah, when black women go missing.
doesn't happen, does it? They don't get found.
No, but the world will stop if us, you know, the world will stop if
Going back to the technology element that you raised, I think I mean, part of my work has been to do with, I'm interested in portraiture as such, and one of the aspects of portraiture for me is that I believe that Rembrandt was probably one of the first performance or video artists in a sense, because if you take all of these portraits and put them together, it's actually a type of film or a storyboard of succession of development, getting older, etc., as such. But coming back to the idea of portraiture now, I think, and in relation to technology and the phone that you mentioned, etc., what's interesting about that, as you suggested, is we get further away from each other with this technology. We have to find a way back. And I think the thing is about portraiture, that's one way of thinking about how we can see each other, recognize each other, paint, picture each other, and also interact with each other as well, both from a political, social, and creative point of view as such. So I think there's a lot of room going forwards to consider how portraiture can change through the technology and through our understanding of it and our understanding of each other. It can develop and actually become a much more interesting area of operation within the arts.
I think I'm like curious about what we're talking about of like togetherness, unity versus the polar extreme of we are not together. And I think there's a lot more nuance than, we're, kumbaya type of situation where people are different. People are fundamentally different. Every being, things are different and also similar. I think the conversation of we're all the same, that, not from an individuality standpoint, but just from like a person walking through the world has a different perspective than another person walking through the world. A person walking through the world is treated similar or different than another person. That perspective is actually what creates compelling work. That perspective of difference or similarity creates compelling work, creates compelling stories and communication. And so I think the most interesting thing about work that artists create is actually flowing through that particular perspective, flowing through that difference that someone experiences.
Yeah, that goes back to the idea of the individual in terms of creativity and different perspectives on things as such. But I don't think artists can do everything. They can only do certain amounts within society. I mean, one of my favourite artists, who I've looked at a lot, and I've met 3 times, is an artist called Joseph Beuys, who's a German artist, and he was very much a political, social artist. He set up a social university in Germany and Dusseldorf. And I think some of his ideas were quite radical in terms of putting the artist forward as the political, creative experience for society. I mean, I don't believe all of that's possible, but it is an interesting idea as we go forward now, particularly with art as a therapy, or art as, dealing with things like anxiety or difference or whatever, or health issues or whatever. So it does have a very, very important part to play as we go forward. And particularly going back to your point about AI, more than ever, because people have more free time, hopefully, in order to pursue other things, I think.
So much is invisibilized, right? So we don't see where people go all the time when people are forced to leave their home, or whatever it may be, that these issues can become invisible to many people. And when we see that, we are struck. We may take action because we have seen something that is heartbreaking. And so I think part of what's interesting to me about art and artists is how do we take that compelling moment of how can the world be this way? How can women be missing and no one is looking for them seemingly? How can someone be laying in the subway in pain? How can billions of birds disappear from the planet every single year? And what do we do? What do we do when we come to that realization is really compelling. And for some people, for artists of the world, that next step is often, I have to create something. I have to express this. But then what? Then I'm curious about that next step. The person who receives that art, who receives the image of the red dress, or whatever it is, what do they take away from that? And do they take action in some way? Or I don't know, I'm curious.
It's interesting to see people come in and look at the red dresses. Some woman yesterday turned around and walked out, wouldn't even go through the rest of the house. Just, I can't deal with this, and walked out. And I guess it was a shock to her. I understand that, but at the same time, what is she carrying out with her? Is she carrying out anger? Is she carrying out frustration? What is she, is she mad at us for showing her?
Mm-hmm.
Art can change people. Now, what I mean by that is this. I came from a very violent family, right? My mother and father, as such. If you read my book, you'll read a bit about that. Now, the wonderful thing about what I found with art was it made me move on as a human being. So art has a very important part to play in healing, as well as the business of just looking as such. And it can affect people in many ways. My main point in terms of my book, or one of my main points, is that art is a wonderful thing. If I've spent time with students over the years, etc., and I've seen the change that's occurred in them when they've found themselves as being able to express themselves in some way, shape or form, coming from very poor backgrounds, coming from homelessness, and then actually being able to transform themselves into something else. And this is the power of art, at the very best edge of it. I'm not saying everything, as such, but I met an artist the other night with a very rich background and a very upper class background, but I'm not going to condemn that. That's her journey, that's the way she moves through life, and that's her contribution. It's wonderful as such. So I think art is like a sort of funnel You move through it as such. But it is also an incredible inspiration as well, and it can change people's lives that come from a very difficult background. Read my book and you'll see.
Fantastic. So what I do in programming dance classes at Kumbe is allows me to give back what I got from dancing growing up, in that I was a latchkey kid, so it was very much like my place to go, and that first second family that I formed in life was at the dance studio and people that I danced with. So I have loved giving the opportunity to adult, non-professional dancers the chance to really like move into practice on something and feel themselves grow and change. At the end of the year, in the fall, we do a program called Dance for Joy. Which is all donation-based, and it wraps up with a performance workshop. So you get to take like a solid 10 weeks and really learn a form or a style and perform it. And it allows the teachers to really build community and for our dancers to have that sense of accomplishment. So I'm enjoying that, and I've loved having classes here so far, and there's this beautiful synergy. Like when it's a drum class, we had a lot of drumming Father's Day / Juneteenth weekend. And just seeing the little kids just get so attracted to wanting to make the drums, but you know they're shy, so mom and dad have to drum so they feel like they can drum, and just watching people pick up rhythms and use this as a space of togetherness, as something that they'll always remember and have a new familiarity with. And then the dancing, I'm really, really grateful for the wonderful teachers in my community. We are an African and diaspora dance studio, so our teaching artists are from all over the world. So far I've had, Jada is our belly dance teacher. She's African American. We've had Kenya, who is Brazilian. She's from Rio de Janeiro. These amazing Afro-Brazilian classes, and then we had drum master Vado and dance master Vado. We did a beautiful drum circle by the Moving Chains exhibit on Juneteenth, which meant a lot to me because I love Charles Gaines is an artist that's meant a lot to me. Personally and artistically, I really loved his work, so I was glad that we got to celebrate that piece there. And then we've had Andosh and Fumu, some Congolese teachers, so folks from everywhere, and so much more. You know, summer's going fast already, but we've just begun. But the what happens, the trickle, the little butterfly effect when you get to touch somebody with culture, you know, be they like coming in on the island from anywhere in the world. How did they know? They didn't know they were going to stumble upon an Afro-Brazilian class and learn about that. They're from Kansas. You know what I mean? Just like getting to expose people and share and bringing the community. Are you a curator and an artist, or do you just hold the space for the
I'm an artist, have been an artist since I was a very young child, and used to draw in the sand. I come from New Mexico, and we didn't have a lot of art in terms of crayons and watercolors and
Art
things like that.
supplies,
So
yeah.
you drew the stuff in the sand. We kind of tend to try to let people know some of the history of people who have made their mark. You know, Indian people who don't get the recognition. You know, we put their picture on the wall, and their story, like Jim Thorpe or John Thorpe, or all the big people who have managed to make it somewhere.
Strange and out of place for a conservation organization to have an artist in residence program and to have kind of like a creative or artistic presence here on the island. But I think it really does tie into that transformative element that we've been talking about, where people come in and experience something that they might not have connected the dots about before, and they leave having made a connection about the world that they live in. For instance, our upcoming show entitled Of Ash and Air by Leslie Ruckman and Gal Nassim is all about something that we essentially walk blindly past every day in New York City and don't recognize, which is collisions with glass, which is the second greatest cause of bird death in North America. So about 250,000 birds are killed just in New York City every single year. As they move through the city, they collide with glass and they don't get to continue their seasonal migration. And these are native birds who have been doing this for millennia. And so what they do is they connect with the material. What Leslie and Gal are doing is they're working with the material of glass and saying, how can we use this material to make connections between the birds that died and make connections between the people who walk by the glass every single day and not realize the effect it has on our ecosystem here. So they've actually they've cast collision victims, migratory birds that our volunteers at New York City Audubon have collected. They cast them in wax and create glass sculptures from their dead bodies, which is, it's morbid, it's solemn, but it's also extremely compelling the way that they honor their bodies in a material that is like completely in contradiction to the bird's life.
Interesting point you've made there, because what it is, it's a great example of how artists can take something and look at it in a completely different way to maybe what a politician, for example, would look at it from, and make something out of it, bring it back into society in some visual form, and actually make people think about it. And as you said, maybe in a startling way, but in a different way, whereby that's good for the world. And I think the way we go forward now, it has to be more like that. It can't be less, because the world needs change.